Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USALA Radio. Señores oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos y Schmidt Chatelier, controlando la máquina digital. Bueno, como de costumbre, noticias locales, regionales, mundiales, sobre todo de Washington. Aquí hay mucho ruido de lo que está pasando en Washington. Bueno, y lo que están haciendo los republicanos por todo el país. No olvidemos que no han aceptado la derrota de Trump. 70% de los republicanos en una encuesta, en la última encuesta que se hizo recientemente, 70% de los republicanos apoyan la idea de que Donald Trump ganó y que de algún modo le robaron las elecciones. Parece increíble, pero cierto, a pesar de todo lo que se ha demostrado a través del país. Para hacer un breve recuento de eso, vamos a hablar un poco más tarde sobre por qué y cómo, de qué modo los republicanos siguen apoyando esta idea. Una de las grandes razones es que están preparando el terreno para las elecciones de mitad de periodo en el 22 y muchos de los republicanos que están apoyando a Trump, Rubio, Rick Scott, tienen ambiciones de presentar su candidatura para el 24. Están esperando a ver qué dice Trump. Creo que todavía hay una división profunda en el Partido Republicano, dentro del partido mismo, entre los republicanos más tradicionales que han aceptado la derrota, que sienten que el partido va en una dirección equivocada, y los republicanos que se aferran a la idea de que Trump ganó y que el presidente Biden no es el presidente legítimo. Y no escuchan argumentos. Así que esto tiene que ver con una parte de la ciencia del pensamiento, del conocimiento que se llama epistemología. Y de acuerdo con esto, pues es un estudio del conocimiento, del saber. Y resulta que ellos están negando la verdad, están negando lo que ya está comprobado, lo que existe, lo están negando. Entonces no quieren saber. Y es difícil en este sentido entablar un diálogo, entablar una conversación para discutir los temas, para tener argumentos coherentes que se puedan presentar y traer a acción. Resulta que estos individuos no responden con lógica. Entonces están pidiendo que neguemos la existencia de los videos que muestran, porque una foto vale más que 1000 palabras, demuestran a ciencia cierta lo que ocurrió en el Capitolio el 6 de enero del 2021. Y no quieren que aceptemos la idea de que fue Trump mismo quien impulsó esta invasión. No quieren aceptar la idea de que los individuos que invadieron el Capitolio no fueron miembros de Antifa o de Black Lives Matter o de otros grupos radicales eran todos los que invadieron gentes que apoyan al expresidente Trump. Ya está QAnon, están los radicales que se llaman, que han formado grupos que apoyan el pensamiento de una superioridad de la raza blanca. Están opuestos a la inmigración porque esto hace que el país tenga más color, tenga una actitud más aceptable para la gente de color, para minorías negros, latinos, asiáticos. Y ya vimos como resultado de los llamados del presidente Trump de acusar a China de haberle dado al mundo este virus y insistiendo en que era de China, etc. Y la reacción irracional de tanta gente de atacar, simplemente atacar un video de una mujer china que atacaron. Así que para gente de apariencia asiática se ha convertido en un peligro caminar por nuestras calles. ¿Cómo es posible? ¿No? Entonces, bueno, ahí está toda esta gente de extrema derecha, grupos que no representan ningún partido. Realmente son grupos anárquicos. No quieren el gobierno, pero solamente tienen la idolatría, tienen a un hombre que está bien desacreditado, como Donald Trump, pero eso es lo que ellos buscan, apoyar esta ideología porque él representa la defensa de lo que ellos ven como una amenaza. Donald Trump representa el pensamiento de tanta gente blanca que simplemente son racistas. Entonces vamos precisamente hoy, este es uno de los temas principales del día de hoy, y lo vamos a leer en inglés porque se trata de una ciudad en Oklahoma, una ciudad de Tulsa en Oklahoma, Tulsa en inglés, que hace 100 años, están marcando ahora el aniversario, el centenario, de una masacre que llaman el Black Street Massacre, the Black Wall Street Massacre, porque era una calle, una sección de Tulsa, en donde había muchos negocios de negros que tenían mucho éxito. Entonces hubo allí un encuentro con un joven negro que luego, al ver que lo iban a probablemente matar, la población negra se rebeló contra esto y allí luego hubo una masacre. Entonces vamos a leer ese segmento para recordar qué sucedió en Tulsa hace 100 años. Porque eso, miren, esto no ha cambiado. Este pensamiento racista no ha cambiado. Está el sur de Estados Unidos todavía aferrado a la idea de una superioridad blanca. No todo el sur, pero ciertamente en estados como Mississippi, en Georgia, en Texas, siguen con esta idea de una superioridad blanca. Es un segmento corto, voy a leerlo en inglés. El título es Tulsa Massacre Remembered. The city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, will mark the 100th anniversary of the Black Wall Street Massacre this Memorial Day, considered one of the worst incidents of racial violence in U.S. history. The two-day wave of attacks almost entirely destroyed one of the country's wealthiest black communities at the time. The conflict occurred after Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoeshiner, was accused of assaulting Sarah Page, a 17-year-old white woman. Hearing Rowland was to be lynched, a group of black residents confronted a crowd at the courthouse, which quickly escalated. Es posible encontrar un timeline de estos eventos. You can see a timeline of these events. You can just Google nowadays, we have this information available. So you can find to verify that this is in fact what happened. Following the initial violence, white mobs, it would sound familiar, white mobs looted and razed the Greenwood district, then known as the Black Wall Street. Attacks were carried out on foot and via private aircraft, with a number in the crowd having been deputized by city officials. So, this was not simply citizens reacting negatively to the crowd, but it was sanctioned by officials. It doesn't say what city officials, but we can assume it was probably the police. And 100 years ago, blacks in the South had no rights, so the police probably were beating everybody up with the consent of the mayor and who knows what else. City council. Blacks had no power either, no political power. But this was a district that had been successful economically, and therefore the white people hated it. 39 deaths were confirmed, though a 2001 report concluded up to 300 black residents may have been killed based on oral history and city records. Okay, imagine that. The report was that 39 people had died, but in reality, a 2001 report said there were probably more like 300. But anyway, it was covered up at the time. Imagine 300 people died in one incident. That could have caused more upheaval around the country. 39 was enough. A moving eyewitness account from the attacks was recovered in 2015. Public interest in the incident was revived by HBO's Watchmen, whose opening scene depicts the violence. President Joe Biden is expected to visit the city Monday to commemorate the date. See an interactive visualization of what was destroyed in the massacre. You can find it. You can find what that attack destroyed. A very progressive part of Tulsa, very developed business, beautiful part of the city that was destroyed simply because it was black, because it was built by successful black business people. Times haven't changed, I suppose, except that now the mob is not only wishing to destroy black property, the mob also attacked the Capitol. But the same kind of mentality that prevailed 100 years ago, but white superiority, is what led the insurrectionists to the Capitol at the instigation of former President Trump Jr., Giuliani, Josh Hawley, and others. That hasn't changed. Vamos a tomar una breve pausa aquí en USALA Radio. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Schmidt Chatelier controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USALA Radio.
Señores oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí en la mesa redonda de Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Schmidt Chatelier, controlando la máquina digital. Bueno, estamos hablando sobre Oklahoma, sobre Tulsa, y poniendo esto en perspectiva, eso fue hace 100 años. Tulsa was 100 years ago. The Capitol invasion was just now, this year, 2021, January 6th. The Republicans, well, first of all, forever and ever, they would have liked us or history to forget about that incident in which officially 39 people died, more than likely around 300 black people were killed. And the echoes of that, 100 years later, here we are. But the same kind of mentality, bringing destruction and death. And that was January 6th. We bring this up because what is happening at this very moment, the Senate of the United States, is being filibustered by Republicans who want to impede a vote. Not a vote that has like immediate consequences for them, but long-term consequences, to form a commission to investigate the events of January 6th. There was no commission to investigate Tulsa 100 years ago. The official story was probably told by the white establishment and then quickly buried. So, but now, the story of January 6th cannot be quickly buried. There is video that will live forever. And we can see it every day. And we watch segments of that every day. This very morning, there were reviews of January 6th on CNN, on MSNBC. They were showing video to explain why it's necessary to have an account of the events of January 6th before Republicans attempt to bury the story. While it's still in the minds of the citizens of this country. And so as we approach the 2022 midterm election, we have to keep in mind that these are the people, these Republicans, 130 of them, maybe it was more, I don't recall the exact number, but at least 130 voted against the Constitution on that very day, on January 6th. They voted to stop the count. And the story continues. Now the House approved it, even with 30 Republicans that voted with the Democrats to pass a bill to form a commission. But now the Senate has engaged in a filibuster to stop the process. So there's no vote yet. So they spent time until the wee hours, until 2 a.m., taking the microphones, stupid people like Senator John Kennedy, an absurd human being, and other Republicans, trying to stop the Senate from voting on a commission to investigate an event that threatened the lives of everybody in that building. That's what's more ridiculous. And the Republicans have engaged in diversion, telling us that perhaps, some idiot congressman said, it looked more like a tourist visit. Yeah, if the tourists come to the Capitol with hammers and sticks and a noose to hang the vice president, what kind of tourist visit is that? What tourist comes to the Capitol ready to kill Nancy Pelosi? But that's what the Republicans insist happened. There's only a handful of them that refuse to bury the head in the sand and say, yeah, it did happen. Moscow Mitch McConnell himself said it. McConnell said that Trump was responsible for that invasion. Kevin McCarthy went before the cameras to say that he had enough of that. Lindsey Graham said, I have been supportive all along, but I can't do it anymore. And then all of a sudden, all three of them folded and went back to their original positions of worshiping Donald Trump. And Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the Republicans in Congress, minority leader Kevin McCarthy, flew to Mar-a-Lago to kiss Trump's ass. That's the Republican Party that we have now. Where is John McCain? Where are the Republicans that people could have a dialogue with? I mean, even Goldwater, there was an extreme conservative, as he said, that there was nothing extreme about conservatism in the defense of liberty. That's what he said. Goldwater, now he's looking like one of the most reasonable Republicans ever, to judge from this crowd that is in the Senate right now. What an absurd situation for this country. To be confronted with the idea that this monster who just destroyed the Constitution, who destroyed our prestige abroad, that he could come back to power? Donald Trump? Okay, well, we'll talk about what's happening to him. It may be tough for him to campaign from behind bars. Anyway. But other things that we need to mention here. As we know, New York City schools will open in September, and the students will be in school, no more of this distance learning. As a teacher, I would find it extremely difficult to have a class, a remote of children. I can see grown-ups perhaps, because if they are paying for a class, they're going to pay attention. They want to do their homework. They're going to study. They're going to prepare. They will not be playing around. But teenagers, kids ages 14 to 18, which is my experience in teaching, at the very least, they will be on a computer, perhaps, so you can see their faces in this distant learning classroom. They will have the phones, their cell phones by the side, under their desk, and they'll be doing everything except listening to whatever the teacher is saying. That's probably, I have spoken to teachers who had to do this, and they said it's very disappointing. It's almost a year wasted, a year of learning wasted. But we also know that it was not just about the classroom, it was not just about the material, about the books, about the book learning. It's also the socialization of the children. And that's where they have suffered most. Uh, the little kids, grade school kids, they missed 1 year of being with their friends, of learning to be with each other. And the teenagers, for them, for many of them, sports and other activities, theater, whatever activity they could engage in, that they had to postpone for a year. And also graduation. We know that that's one of the dreams of most people who go to school. They want to see that day when they receive the diploma, high school diploma, a college diploma, a doctoral degree, all that. And there's nothing happening, or there was like we were not allowed to be in the room for. In my family, there was a college graduate, and we could not be with him. It was remote. We could see a picture of him, a video, but there was no presence. And that's not the biggest tragedy with COVID. Let's remember that the more than 500 million people who died, most of them died alone, no family around them, because that was the nature of this virus. You could not go in unless you had a hazmat suit. So it's not only about graduation, it's about just life. What a miserable time for so many people. How it destroyed the economy. I have a friend who not only does his job, he broke a leg, he can't work. And this is one situation, and there's probably 1 million people in similar situations in this country with no money. And where is the Republican soul to say, yeah, let's pass this bill, let's help them? That's what's sad about what's going on in this country. And all we talk about is Trump every day. Why? He should have gone away. He should have retired and never heard from. I mean, the last time we heard anything about Jimmy Carter, except he was ill, he's still ill. How about Obama? He only came out to denounce Trump's behavior. How about George Bush, George W? So they know to leave the scene, to retire, to yield power. The most stupid, the most ignorant, uninformed, unqualified president in US history. He insists on the fact that he is still president because he won the election. One of the most depressing nights I spent recently was the night of November when Trump came out at 10:30 at night and declared that he was the winner. And I stayed all night praying that that was not true. And it wasn't true. But 70 million people still believe it. This country is crazy. Bueno, señores oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí en la mesa redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Switch Chatelier and Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USALA Radio.
Señores oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda. De Roundtable les habla Fernando Méndez, Schmidt Chatelier, Dani Ramos, controlando la máquina digital. Bueno, a cambiar un poquito de dirección, hablando del COVID, que destruyó la economía de este país, destruyó las vidas de tantas gentes y todavía pues, no se ha ido. Según los científicos, va a estar con nosotros por mucho tiempo. A pesar de la vacuna, estamos vacunados ya, hemos pasado el 50%, creo. Se espera que cuando lleguemos a un 70%, vamos a estar más cerca de una vida normal. Entre tanto, continuamos sufriendo con el hecho de que hay mucha gente que resiste la vacuna. Pero aquí hay un dato interesante. Más de 100 universidades van a requerir la vacuna para sus estudiantes. Muchas universidades están haciendo algo para remediar la situación con estudiantes que vienen de otros países donde no han tenido acceso a la vacuna, entonces la universidad les provee la vacuna. Como ya sabemos, hay un superávit, hay lo opuesto de un déficit, hay superávit, hay extra vacunas, porque hay mucha gente que no se vacunó, hay mucha gente que no se ha hecho la segunda vacuna. No se olviden que si usted se vacunó ya y tiene, digamos, Moderna, le dieron el primer pinchazo, usted tiene que regresar a que le den el segundo pinchazo, aunque le duela, porque es así como se vacuna usted con más efectividad. Este es un servicio de USALA Media para nuestra sociedad. Así que amigos, insistimos en que no hemos salido de este virus, no hemos salido de esta pandemia. Así que continúen cuidándose, lavándose las manos, mascarillas donde sea necesario. Hay muchas tiendas que todavía las requieren. Y en sitios en donde usted está en un grupo grande, use las mascarillas. Lavarse las manos, desinfectarse con frecuencia y pues evitar estos grandes grupos, que allí es donde se propaga el virus. So, 100 universities will require vaccinations for students. The universities will provide vaccines for incoming students who are not vaccinated, whether they are U.S. or students coming from overseas. Some universities offer tuition incentives for students to get vaccine. Purdue is encouraging the vaccine. They are not insisting. It's optional. They are not requiring. I saw an interview with the president of Purdue. He says, "We told our students that if you choose not to vaccinate, you will be required to undergo tests frequently." Purdue had in-person learning during the pandemic. Purdue has not raised tuition since 2012. And yet, they have had record enrollment. The first time they have a class of 12,000 as a freshman class. So it must be a very popular university. And it is. It has great prestige. So other universities are requiring that. In Philadelphia, we know the University of Pennsylvania, Drexel, are requiring the vaccine, Temple. And some of them have international students. So they're also expecting to have to vaccinate international students who will be arriving for the September classes. So this is the only way we're going to reach a level at which the virus cannot progress. We are, Pennsylvania as a whole is in a good situation. New York also. And as we said before, New York City schools will open. Philadelphia schools are expected to also open in the fall. it's time for several reasons, and the scientists are agreeing that young people are less likely to acquire the virus. Teachers need to be vaccinated. If we get our students in class, if we get guarderias, if we get daycare centers to take the young ones, their parents can go to work. And that is how you energize the economy. That's how you restart this economy. So we're picking up speed. One of the things is, one of the measurements is the number of applicants for unemployment, and it keeps going down. The number of jobs increases. It has not increased as much as it was expected for the month of April, but there are more jobs. And if you look at the just on the internet, the number of jobs available everywhere, there's probably going to be a shortage of people. In fact, there is right now for the restaurant industry, which is one of those key industries. We'd love to point out the fact that Philadelphia had become a restaurant mecca right before the pandemic hit. We had some of the best restaurants in the country. Zahav, Vetri, Park, some downtown, and there are restaurants elsewhere that were doing extremely well. Some of them are not coming back. One of our favorite restaurants, Bibou, is a French restaurant, magnificent food. They are not coming back. At least that was the latest information we had. And there are many other restaurants that probably will not return because everybody knows the restaurant industry it's a difficult business. So, well, we're going to take another break in USALA Radio. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Schmidt Chatelier and Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento con una nota final.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USALA Radio.
Señores oyentes de USALA Radio, les habla Fernando Méndez, aquí desde La Mesa Redonda. The Roundtable, les habla, está Smith Chatelier y Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Esta nota ahora es sobre la necesidad de reconstruir este país. No solamente porque la pandemia hizo tanto daño, sino porque hay necesidad urgente de reconstruir puentes, carreteras, escuelas, edificios de escuelas. Hay mucha construcción en este país que es necesario hacer una inyección de dinero en las economías de diferentes estados. El presidente Biden tiene ideas muy avanzadas, muy progresistas. Y entonces ahí está la diferencia entre lo que él quiere y lo que los republicanos quieren, porque ellos nada más quieren detener el avance de la agenda de Biden. So, Republicans are engaged right now, not only in being an obstacle to this commission that needs to investigate January 6th. They're also opposed to rebuilding the country. It's like all of a sudden they discovered fiscal sanity and they're concerned that there's too much money spent and so on. the president has this idea to invest a large amount of money, to have trillions of dollars, to have a true impact and energize the economy, rebuild the infrastructure, strengthen our educational systems all around the country. Think about that alone. Think about that line in the budget alone. Money dedicated to education. Biden just mentioned one salient fact. A century ago, it was okay to just have a high school degree. In the 1950s, 1960s, you could start businesses, you could operate with a high school degree, you were competitive. But that has changed a lot. And now, to be competitive, you need a college degree as a minimum, or you need strong skills in a trade, as an electrician, as a carpenter, whatever trade you choose. Is also that's going to be competitive no matter what, because the trades are also requiring people who know what to do. So you enroll yourself as an apprentice electrician, an apprentice roofer, an apprentice carpenter. You will have great jobs for life. But for a lot of people, a diploma, a high school diploma, is not going to be enough. And colleges are graduating people, by the thousands, by the millions perhaps in this country. And there is a gap here between, which is I mentioned before, and it was Egypt was a great example of that. In Latin America, that also has happened. That you graduate people, you give them degrees in the humanities, English, history, languages, but there's no practical application many times for these jobs. And so early on, Germany and Japan, for instance, very successful societies. Germany, after the war, chose to train people in two ways, academically and for the trades. And so they trained mechanics, they trained people in the sciences that also had practical applications, even for a pharmacist. And then they trained people for the humanities with history and language degrees. And that is valid. And that's how Germany became a powerhouse, an industrial society. Japan, likewise, competitive. Even to this day, those two countries are economically successful in spite of all the setbacks they have had. That's what we need to do. And so Biden is saying, now we should support education. Forget about just up to high school. We should make college accessible to everybody. And he wants to put money behind that. But what are the Republicans doing? They are not supporting that. The Republicans are engaged in creating more and more obstacles to avoid, to stop the population from being educated, perhaps. They have no interest in having an educated population that will find out that they are empty suits, that they have no ideas, that at this point it's a party of no. They have nothing to offer to us. The Republicans have no agenda. Remember one thing. The platform for the Republican Party in the last election, name one thing that they had on that platform. There was no platform. Because their idol, Donald Trump, didn't need a platform. He was going to win, according to them, based on personality cult, based on the fact that he is Donald Trump and his name was in many buildings. So there was no need for them to have a platform. But now that the Democrats have a president and control Congress, and no matter how tight the control of the Senate is, they can still do something. They can accomplish something, and they're tempting Biden to do something more drastic and abolish that filibuster. At this point, this very moment, that filibuster is affecting the way Biden wants to act, the things that this government wants to do. They are creating an obstacle. At this very moment, they delay the vote. The vote supposedly will take place today. No guarantee of what kind of vote it will be. There's only a handful of Republicans supporting the Democrats. But they do have certain tools that they can use to overcome the Republican stubbornness. They are intractable at this point. They don't want to do anything. So they are the party of no. No ideas, do nothing, know nothing, bury your head in the sand. And going back to the education theme, imagine that we reached the level of Cuba, but in the 1960s and 70s, Fidel Castro got Cuba to have 95% literacy. Imagine that. Imagine that we could achieve that. Instead of having the shame that we have had at some point of having college graduates who went to college because they wanted to play basketball and they went on a scholarship, but they cannot write. So we need that. We need quality education. Not just that you go to college and play football and basketball. College is not for the NCAA. College is to study, to have a degree that you can translate it into something you can do in life and earn a living, a decent living. So right now, Biden is proposing to finance the education of our people to improve the lives of everybody. The Republicans are engaged in doing nothing, in stopping progress. And that cannot be tolerated. That's, as I said, Egypt is a good example of what could happen. During the government of Anwar Sadat, Egyptian leader, there were so many Egyptians well educated, almost as many Iranians who were also well educated. And that happened later in 70, no, what was the revolution? 89, Iranian Revolution. Anyway, the revolution in Iran was before that too. And so anyway, so Egypt, Anwar Sadat had to face the reality that his people, although well educated, had no jobs. And that caused an upheaval. And eventually, well, we know that he was killed by one of his own people. The Iranian Revolution, and that was the government of Jimmy Carter. Remember that? That the Iranians freed the hostages when Ronald Reagan came into power. And they would not give Jimmy Carter even that. They would not grant him the favor of freeing the hostages when he was still in power. But those are societies of well-educated people that could be manipulated. And that is where we are. Are we a well-educated society? Or should we have a bigger ambition? Should we be better educated and have people of such caliber that a charlatan, a conniver, a liar like Donald Trump cannot manipulate the people? Is that possible? Because look, we are not even at the level of Germany in the 1930s, and look what happened to them. Adolf Hitler. Yeah. And by the way, a lot of comparisons between Hitler and Donald Trump because of the historic circumstances. Somebody did mention Hitler recently. A Republican mentioned Hitler. Marjorie Taylor Greene said that the vaccines were like the Holocaust. But that's the caliber of Republicans that we have now, and that have been on the national scene in the last decade. That intellectual caliber of Republicans. So if Biden succeeds, we will have a better educated society. We will not be suffering under the conspiracy theories of QAnon. A well-educated society will not tolerate such ignorance. But here we are. Some of the critics are pointing out that Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, John Kennedy, all these senators are very well educated, Ivy League graduates. So what happened to that education? What happened to that? So it's not that they're not well educated, it's not that they don't understand, it's that they are cynical. They know exactly what they're doing, but they don't care. The Republicans at this point have no soul. And there's a lot in the budget, for instance, for veterans, to help them, to help the veterans. And yet, the Republicans, supposedly in love with patriots, are not helping. They are opposed to this bill that is good for veterans, it's good for education, it's good for infrastructure, it's good for energizing our economy and coming back strong with the sciences. Because we're behind now, behind in research with respect to China and other places, especially countries where science and knowledge, technology, information technology, computer technology, all this is being investigated, and we have fallen behind. Why? Because we are unwilling, have been unwilling to invest. At the very least, we need safe bridges, safe roads to travel. Eisenhower began the construction of the national highway system after he saw what the Germans had done. So let's not wait for another inspiration like that. We need to move our country in the right direction. Hemos llegado al final de esta edición de La Mesa Redonda. Les saluda Fernando Méndez, Schmidt Chatelier. Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Hasta la próxima.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USALA Radio.